Next on our contact page is an FAQ section. Frequently asked questions. This is pretty common in web design as well. And we do have a unique element here, which is an accordion. Now, if you're not familiar with accordion is basically something that you click to reveal some text, and then you can click again to hide. This is a way that you can just show headlines instead of overwhelming a user with lots of text at the same time, and the user can just reveal what he is interested in reading. Now, this is a little bit more complicated than the interaction that we previously had, because previously, number one, we could only affect a hover state, and now we want to affect a click. And then the other thing is that there's multiple elements that are being animated or transitioning here. We've got the text, we've got the car that is changing sides, we've got this plus icon that I want to rotate to turn into an X. So there's multiple things going on at the same time, which means we need to move into Webflow's more advanced interaction panel. And let's go ahead and do this. So first of all, let's build out this section and then create this animation. So we already have here our grid, so we can just use that, and I can just go ahead and add an H2 element and paste have questions. So that's good as it is. Have questions. I can have that span 2 columns. Now, for this column to hold multiple elements, I'm just going to need a div to hold all of them. So let me bring in a div, Command E div, and we can have that span 2 columns and call that FAQ list wrapper to wrap everything that's inside. Now let's start by creating one item and making sure that it animates and works properly, and then we can just duplicate that. So let's create first this card, and let's bring in another div, and let's call that FAQ item. We can actually go ahead and apply some classes to that as it is, right? We've got the same thing that we did here. We can bring padding, we can apply padding small, we can apply background color yellow, background color lemon. We've got that here, and we can apply round corners. So that is done. Now, looking at this, I can already see we're going to have 2 groups here, right? This is going to act as one group, which I'll need to set as flex with space between. So this is the question is going to be aligned to the left and the icon to the right. And then I'll need this question as another div. So let's bring in these divs. Let's bring in a div and actually copy and paste so that we have 2 divs. The first one, I'm going to call this FAQ question wrapper, and the second one, let's call it FAQ answer wrapper. For this one, it's actually quite simple. Let's bring in a text block and paste the text. That's not too complicated. And for the question wrapper, we do need to bring in a text and bold it, make it bold. So Command E, text block, and paste that, and actually select it and make it bold. So that's good. We also want to bring in the image. So I went ahead and upload the assets from here. Let's see where it is in the assets panel. We've got the FAQ. With a grid, it's so hard. I'm going to undo that. It's so hard to drag things to the right place. I'm just going to hold the text, Command D image, and then select this image. Okay. Now let's select the FAQ question wrapper, turn it into a flex box with a direction horizontal, already good. And instead of left align, let's space between and make sure they are centered. So this element looks pretty good. I can see a problem if this question becomes too long. If there's like this question is very long, you can see we might have some problem here. So I might want to select the wrapper and just make sure we have a little bit of gap, you know, in case this is too long. But for now, we can remove this. Okay, for higher, I would select the wrapper and give it a little bit of a bottom margin to create a bit of a space between it and the answer. Okay, 20, just to be clean. Okay, so we've got the FAQ item. It's styled properly. Now let's go ahead and tackle the animation. Now let's talk about what I want to have. How am I going to animate it? Now we've talked a little bit in previous videos. It was about overflow hidden when we talk about the math and scheme. In this case, I'm going to show you how that's going to be very, very useful. So our text answer here is wrapped in this div, FAQ answers wrapper. And by default, there is no height specified to it. The height is auto. If there are 2 lines of text, it's going to be bigger than 1 line of text, and so forth. But of course, we can also set a fixed value, like let's say 30 pixels, if I want this to be a specific size. Now you can see now we've got 30 pixels or maybe 35 pixels. You can see the box, the wrapper is actually smaller than the text, but the text is overflowing outside the bounding of this div. And right now the overflow is set to visible, which means we're seeing the text here, okay? But if I'm going to go ahead and set the overflow to hidden, now note what's happening. the text is being basically cropped or masked by the fact that its parent element is smaller. So here's what I want to do. I basically want to animate this from 0 to whatever the size is. So this is basically the animation that I want to create. It's going to reveal the text and grow the card at the same time. And of course, I'm going to rotate this as well. So I'm going to remove this for now. I just wanted to show you what we are going to animate, but it was very important to change the overflow to hidden. Otherwise, this wouldn't be working. So now that we've got this, now let's start setting up the interaction. Now, the first thing is thinking about what do we want to happen? Well, what we want to happen is if somebody clicks this icon, or actually the question itself. So this whole wrapper, FAQ question wrapper, if somebody clicks this thing, we want to make something happen. We want to trigger something. So we call this a trigger. So let's take a look at Webflow's interaction panel, which is right here on the right side. Now, before I dive into setting up the interaction, I do want to point your attention to this version that we have here. Right now, by default, we have classic interaction, and we can also change this to interaction with GSAP. And as you can see, this is something new. Now, GSAP interactions are a new powerful engine that Webflow has implemented. And like most things that are more powerful, it's also more complex. So in this part of the course, we're going to stick to the classic interaction because it's way easier to set up for what we're trying to do right here. Later in the course, we'll also explore the GSAP interaction and when we should be using them and how. But for now, let's stick to the classic interaction. In any case, the key concept that we're covering here, which is what is the trigger, what is the element that we want to animate, and how are we going to animate? These are the same principle no matter the animation engine. So let's get right into it and cover the triggers. You can see that we've got a bunch of triggers, either an element trigger or page triggers. So element triggers are triggers that has to do with an element, like in this case, the FAQ question wrapper. Page are things that has to do with the page. In this case, we can explore what we've got here. We've got mouse clicks, mouse hover, mouse moving on top of the element. We're going to start with mouse click because this is what we want here. You can also, by the way, later explore what are page elements. So when the mouse moves in the viewport, or when the page is scrolling, or when the page is loading, by the end of this course, you would have used all of them. So for now, let's start with something simple. When somebody clicks an element, something happens. And you can see that by default, we've got actually what happens on the first click and what happens on the second click, because it's very common that you want to switch on, switch off. And in this case, we're going to use both, right? First click is going to open, second click is going to close. So let's start with on the first click. And basically, we can trigger either like a simple animation or create our own unique animation, which is what we want here. So let's start a new animation. There's nothing to pick from because we haven't created an animation so far. So we're going to have to click the add an animation to create a new one. And I'm going to call this open accordion. Okay, now here's how it goes. I can basically select an element and add an action to it. Okay, and we've got a bunch of actions. But the first thing is to set what are we going to change? Let's start with something simple. Let's select the image and we want to rotate it. So I'm going to hit the plus. I'm going to look for rotate, which is under transform. And I'm going to, from all of these panels, I think it's this one. It's Z, right? It's this one. Let's change that and rotate it 45 degrees. So by rotating it 45 degrees, it now turns from a plus into an X, and that's pretty cool. We also have stuff like duration, and I can play this, and now you see what happens. It's moving, it's animating. Now, we do have something here called easing, which we also already saw before, but I didn't dive too much into that. Now, let me do a quick pause to talk about easing because it's very important when it comes down to animation. Here's an example that was built by Christopher Travers. Basically, easing is this. If something just animates linearly, moving at the same speed throughout, the animation, it looks mechanical. It doesn't look real because in real life, things accelerate and decelerate. And there's actually so many ways that things can accelerate and decelerate. They can accelerate fast, decelerate. There's so many things. They can even bounce. They can do a lot of different things. And Webflow gives you all of these options. So thanks to Christopher for actually visualizing this. Based on this, we can decide how we want things to work, right? So let's try something like ease out, which means it starts out fast and then it's slowing down towards the end of the animation. And if we go back here, now this is a duration of half a second, so it's a little bit difficult to see it. But if I'm going to select ease out, let's actually change this to 1 second just so that we can see it and hit play. You can see that it was moving fast and then slowing down. Actually, I'm going to put it at half a second. It's way too long a second for this animation. But now you can see it moves fast and then slowing down. It doesn't stop immediately. It slows down and it's really nice and smooth. So we've got the first part of the animation. Great. But here's what we actually want to do. By default right now, we start by seeing the answer. And that's not what I want to do. I want to by default hide the answer and then only reveal it when somebody clicks. So to do that, I'm going to select the FAQ answer wrapper. And what I want to change is, remember, we changed the height of the element of the wrapper to hide. So let's see how we change the size. Right down here, we've got the size, and we can set the height to 0 pixels. And when I set that, it becomes 0 pixel, and as you can see, it was hidden. Of course, we're going to then later animate it back to its original position, but I wanted to start from 0. Now, right now it's animating to 0, right? And if I'm going to play this, you can see that what's happening right now is it's animating to 0, but I actually want it to start this way. So to do that, we've got this checkbox here, which is called set as an initial state. And now note when I'm clicking this, this is going to move from being the second thing that animates, it's jumping to the top. So this is basically happening before the animation happens, right? Before somebody even clicks this, this has been set to 0. But once after somebody clicks it, we want it to animate back to its original position. So let's go ahead and duplicate that. And then change the size from 0, let's change it to auto, which is basically how big it should be depending on how much text there is inside. Now let's try this out. So now it's animating in, but note something interesting happens. First, it reveals itself, and then the plus is animating. And this is because we do have 2 steps here, right? First, size animation, and then rotate animation. But actually what I want them to happen simultaneously together. So I'm going to drag this image to animate together with the previous elements. And you can see here, it's going to start with the previous one instead of afterward. And when I'm going to hit plus now, okay, so now you can see it is animating and it's doing exactly what I want this to do. So let me set this to save. And let's actually go ahead and preview this. I'm going to hit preview and I'm going to click this. And it actually works. One thing that I do see, though, is that we've got a little bit too much padding here on the bottom. So we do need to remove, I guess, this padding that we have here. However, one more thing that I'm seeing is, unlike this button, which changes my cursor to a pointy finger, meaning I can click on this, because this is not an actual link that we have here, my cursor is not changing and not indicating that this is clickable. So I think it would be a good practice to do that, to change so people know that this is actually clickable. So this is, when we are on the FAQ question wrapper, I'm going to go back into the styling. This is basically a style for the FAQ question. I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom, and we can see here we've got cursor auto. I'm going to change this to pointer, right? I can choose a lot of options here. Pointer. Let's try this right now. And okay, right now this is working. Okay, nothing happens when I click again because we haven't set up the close animation. I also want to reduce this. I want to reduce this padding here, or maybe change it to 5 so that it would look better here. Okay, so let's set up the second interaction, and that is on the second click. So let's set an animation again. Now we do have an open accordion. So what I want to do is I'm going to animate things backward. So while I can't create a new animation, it's actually going to be easy to duplicate this one to open accordion toe and then just change that. So let's rename this close accordion. And then what I want to do is start with the size of, actually we don't need an initial state in the going back, right? Because we already know that it's going to be auto and we want it to animate into 0. So this is actually good. We actually don't need this one animating into auto. So I'm going to hit backspace to delete that. And the rotation, we probably need to rotate this back minus 45 instead of 45 to go back to its original position. Or actually, maybe I need to animate it to 0. Yeah, I think I just need to animate it back to 0. And I want them to animate together. So drag that on top of it. Let me save that. Now let's preview this. And now we've got open and close animation, and that looks pretty good. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is what would happen if I copy this FAQ item 1, 2, 3, and we've got 3 of them. Let's add a little bit of a bottom padding to space them out. And actually, maybe I would put top padding to, I think that would look a little bit better because it pushes it from here as well. Now, we've duplicated them, but note what happens now. I'm going to hit preview, and when I'm going to click this one, only this one is going to work, which is actually what I wanted. But what I wanted to show you is that sometimes when you're doing an interaction and you're animating something, you're going to animate the whole class. Now, in this case, this was set by default to only apply siblings with this class, which is great. But sometimes it's going to be set to all elements with this class. And if this was the case, it would actually affect all of them at the same time. So if I would click here, they would all open and they would all close, right? And that's not what you want. So in this case, I want this interaction only to affect siblings, meaning it's only going to affect this text wrapper, which is a sibling of the element that created the interaction. So I just wanted to show you that you can change what you are affecting right from this dropdown, right? You can affect only children, only siblings, only parents. But this is really important because sometimes you do want to affect things on the whole website, and sometimes you only want to affect the element that you are affecting, that you're trying to animate right now. So this was a really basic introduction to Webflow's interactions. We'll dive much more into that as we're going down.